Imagine riding for weeks without proper washing, your clothes carrying every mile you've traveled, dust settling into your skin until it feels permanent, and then finally reaching a small frontier town where a bathhouse waits behind a quiet wooden door. For many cowboys, that moment felt almost unreal. Not luxury, but survival finally loosening its grip. But why was something as simple as bathing so rare? And what does that reveal about the hidden truth behind the Wild West? The answer challenges everything we think we know about cowboy life. Before we uncover what history tried to hide, subscribe to Unseen Evidence, because some truths were never meant to be found, and tell me where you're watching this from. I'm curious to know. Let's continue. The image most people carry of the cowboy is polished by legend, shaped by sunsets and silence, a lone rider crossing endless land as if untouched by discomfort. But the real story begins somewhere far less romantic, in the quiet hours before dawn when dust clings to skin and clothing feels heavier with every passing day. Because the truth rarely included in popular stories is that cowboys did not live clean lives by modern standards. And this wasn't because they didn't care, but because survival reshaped priorities in ways most people today would find difficult to imagine. The frontier demanded endurance, and endurance often meant accepting conditions that were rough, imperfect, and deeply human. Water was not always available, and when it was, it had to serve many purposes first: drinking, cooking, sustaining animals, and only after all that could anyone think about washing themselves, meaning days or even weeks could pass without proper bathing, and over time the smell of sweat, leather, dust, and smoke became part of the environment itself, something so common that it stopped feeling unusual. Clothing acted like a second skin, heavy fabrics absorbing the long miles ridden under the sun, drying slowly after rain, holding on to every experience the trail imposed, and a single shirt might last months without a full wash, not as a neglectful choice, but because washing required resources and time that were rarely available. Even boots carried stories, thick leather worn day after day, sometimes left on longer than comfort allowed because removing them could mean swollen feet refusing to fit back inside, and so practicality guided decisions that might seem strange now. Yet these habits reflected adaptation rather than carelessness. Cowboys improvised where they could, wiping faces with bandanas that served as dust filters, masks, towels, and symbols all at once, airing clothing in sunlight whenever possible, brushing dirt away with dry cloth instead of water, turning small acts into rituals that preserve dignity in a world defined by movement. And despite popular assumptions, hygiene was not entirely absent, but transformed into something different, something shaped by necessity. Rather than luxury, teeth were cleaned with whatever materials existed, twigs or salt or simple rinsing, and conversations about breath or scent rarely carried embarrassment because everyone shared similar conditions, meaning expectations shifted alongside reality. Saloons, often remembered as lively centers of music and laughter, also held layers of scent built from travel and hard work. Yet within those spaces, people found community rather than discomfort, because familiarity softened what outsiders might notice immediately. Bathhouses, when available, became almost sacred experiences, moments of warmth and stillness that allowed travelers to reconnect with a version of themselves that felt briefly renewed, and barbershops offered something deeper than grooming. They provided structure, mirrors reflecting faces that rarely paused long enough to be examined, creating a sense of order against the chaos of frontier life. Appearance carried meaning even within harsh environments. A slightly cleaner hat or a freshly shaved face could signal reliability or professionalism, showing that hygiene was tied not only to comfort, but to identity and trust. Weather constantly interfered with any attempt at cleanliness. Heat intensified odors while cold discouraged washing. Altogether, storms turned dust into mud that clung stubbornly to clothing, forcing people to adapt again and again. And through it all, myths slowly formed. Stories shared around fires and retold across generations, gradually smoothing away the discomfort until only the romantic outline remained. Later films would reinforce that outline, presenting cowboys in spotless costumes under perfect lighting, creating an image that audiences embraced because it felt heroic. But historical records quietly reveal a different picture. Letters describing long journeys marked by rare opportunities to bathe. Diary entries celebrating small moments of comfort as if they were treasures. Photographs showing faces weathered by reality rather than glamour, and within these details, a deeper truth emerges. Cowboys were not careless individuals ignoring hygiene, but people navigating an environment where survival dictated every choice. They balanced practicality with personal pride, sometimes carrying small grooming tools or scented oils to reclaim a sense of control over their surroundings, showing that even in hardship humans seek familiarity and comfort. Laundry required enormous effort, hauling water, scrubbing fabric, waiting for it to dry in unpredictable conditions, meaning many simply wore garments until replacement became possible. And the unique scent of the trail became almost symbolic, a mixture that represented endurance more than neglect. Observers from distant cities often reacted with surprise or discomfort when encountering the reality of frontier life, their expectations shaped by romantic tales rather than lived experience. But for those within the culture, the conditions felt normal, and this contrast between myth and reality reveals something larger about how history is remembered. We polish stories until they shine, removing the rough edges that make them authentic, turning complex human experiences into symbols that feel easier to admire. Yet understanding the truth does not destroy the legend. Instead, it adds depth, showing resilience built through adaptation rather than perfection. Because courage is not always clean or polished. Sometimes it looks like continuing forward, despite discomfort, accepting dust and sweat as part of existence while still maintaining moments of dignity. Over time, as towns expanded and railroads connected distant regions, access to soap and water improved, gradually changing habits and expectations. But the early years left a lasting imprint on the cowboy identity, reminding us that legends often grow from realities far more complicated than we imagine. And when we look beyond the romantic image, we find something perhaps more compelling: ordinary. People facing extraordinary circumstances, redefining normal again and again. And maybe the fascination with cowboys endures not because they lived perfectly, but because they embodied persistence, adapting to environments that demanded strength without promising comfort, leaving behind a history that smells less like myth and more like truth. A reminder that beneath every cinematic silhouette was a human being carrying the marks of their journey, imperfect yet resilient, shaped by a world that valued survival above all else. And somewhere between legend and reality, the real cowboy continues to exist, not spotless, not idealized, but undeniably human, riding forward through history while the dust settles slowly behind them.